Welcome to Risk Minds International 2020. I'd now like to have a conversation with Blair Sheppard, PwC's Head of Global Strategy, to understand his views on the future and what this may mean to us. Hi, Blair.
Hi, Simon. How are you?
I'm very well, yeah. How's lockdown treating you?
Really well, thank you. We are multi-generational households, and I'm getting to know my grandchildren really, really well.
Awesome, awesome. I'm really interested in a book you've just written, which sets some tone for the future for us. It's called 10 Years to Midnight. I wonder whether you can describe us a bit more about the book.
Well, it's essentially a book that says there are 4 crises that if we don't address the next decade, the world goes much, much darker. And it's meant to be a positive story because there's some solutions, but it starts pretty dark.
And why 10 years? That seems quite soon.
Well, it's not a trick. It's actually, we discovered it, right? PwC doesn't use the word crisis happily, and 10 years is soon. The reason is that all 4 crises are the same, which is it's bad now, it's worse next year, it's worse the year after that. If we don't address it in the 10 years, then it starts to unwind in some really, really problematic ways. And they're all the same, just like that.
So I wonder whether you could take us through the 4 crises in a bit more detail and bring to life your conclusions there.
Sure. So let's start with one, which is the crisis of technology. What we mean by that is actually the ubiquitous technologies in our life, the industrial system and IT, the way we're talking to each other now, Simon. Turns out both of them have negative consequences that just get worse over the next decade. The industrial system, it's the CO2 in the atmosphere. And the problem there is that if we don't address it within a decade, it becomes largely irreversible. And in technology, it's sort of the impact on society, the sort of massive disparity in wealth, and then the invisibility of AI that become much, much, much more difficult in the next decade. So that's the crisis of technology.
Okay.
The crisis of prosperity is essentially that across the lifespan, from early college graduates to just about to retire, things look worse for a lot of people in the world, and they stop dreaming, trying, working through it. So let me give you a quick example. In the U.S., the people between 55 and 64 who have self-funded retirement or in a defined contribution plan, 48% of them have less than $10,000 set aside. Now think about that, $10,000 for a lifetime after you retire. They're retiring broke. If you take in the UK, the college graduates, it turns out that the average debt for a college graduate in the UK is £48,000. And so they're both burdened, and it turns out the college grads are going to be taking the taxes from the people who haven't supported their retirement. Problem all over the world. The third is because of those first 2, I think, actually, people don't trust institutions anymore, and it's getting worse. And so the data from Edelman's survey essentially shows that a question they asked, which is, is the system working for you? And it turns out that it used to be about 20 years ago, 70, 72, 73% of people would say it's working for them. It's now down to 18%, and 48% say it's working against me. That's awful data. And you see it, therefore, in all the protests around the world. Yep. The final one is kind of derivative, which is crisis of leadership. We just don't have the leaders we need to deal with the 3 issues I just described. We're not making progress against them in any meaningful way. And we have 10 years. That's not a long time.
No, it's not. No, it's not. And what do you think it means for businesses? Surely this is an agenda they need to kind of step into.
Yeah, I mean, I think it turns out it's material for every business now. So if you take the crisis of prosperity, the problem is if more and more people are less and less well off, eventually what happens is the economy eats its tail, and we just don't have customers. Right? And so it's okay that there's wealth disparity because it turns out those who are successful should benefit, but it is so extreme now that actually we're creating 2 whole classes of people. And so you have really, really, really low-end box stores buying online as cheap as you can, and you have people who are buying massively expensive luxury goods and no one in between. That's an unsustainable model. If you take the technology crisis and you take climate, it's now material both because of physical risk of climate and because of the massive pressure that will occur to get to net zero in every business. It turns out that the problem with that one, like all of them, is it's really hard because you're changing everything from how we farm to how we transport to how we build to how we manufacture to our energy system. That's everything we do. And so changing that in a decade is really hard. And so there'll be huge pressure on businesses. And if you take sort of institutional legitimacy, every one of the businesses in the world is operating in a system that is required for it to work. So the legal system, the capital markets, the tax system. And if those aren't trusted, it puts real pressure on business to be successful, and it creates real serious distrust in business itself.
Yep.
And then finally, if we don't have the leaders in the public sector, we probably don't have the leaders we need in the private sector either. And so they're material for everyone in the world, not just politics and civil society, but business as well.
And obviously we've just had a US election. Does any of that change your view?
No, actually, I think that what you see in the political sphere is that we just don't have an engine that can move as fast as the crises are coming. And so I think the burden is going to be on business to address these. It's going to be, I think, really shareholder led, and then business as well. And I hope the governments catch up, because it turns out no matter how ambitious the president is, the system will just make it very hard for him to make the kind of actions we need.
Yes.
The life cycle of politics is either 4 years or 30 years. We're talking about something that needs to address the massive element of the system, systemic problems that are hard to change in the period of time we need. And government just, I don't think, is up to the task, including multilaterals, by the way, who are also even more challenged than national governments.
And Blair, our conference here is for financial services and risk professionals within this industry. What do you think is important for them?
I think it's important across the entire value chain. So it relates to the nature of the risk with customers and the opportunity sitting with customers. All of the forces affect them. It influences the nature of the asset management challenge. So for example, notions like indices probably don't work, because firms will be very, very different in terms of how well they respond to these crises, and therefore firm-specific analysis will be critical. And it influences the operation of the financial services themselves. So for example, laying people off into this headwind is kind of a tough thing to do. If you don't address the technology challenges, then you won't be competitive. And so I think if you're not dealing with the physical risks of climate with your customer base and with the assets, then actually you could have value destroyed really, really quickly. And so it's incredibly pertinent in financial services, probably more than anyone in the world, from insurance to banking.
Okay. And you've painted a relatively gloomy picture. I mean, is there some hope? I mean, do you see some tailwinds which can help us here?
Yeah, I actually painted a gloomy picture because I want us to act. We only have 10 years, and these are really hard problems. So we've got to get onto it. But actually, there's a couple of sources of optimism. One of them is, through COVID, if there's a silver lining, we taught ourselves how to do things massively and fast.
Yep.
So we just need to take the same kind of approach, which is, let's focus on one really big issue we all agree on and nail it. And then let's focus on another really big issue we really agree on and nail it. And do that massively, and then bring the rest of the system with us behind that. So in a sense, there is a silver lining to COVID as a result. The second reason I'm optimistic is actually shareholders have caught on to all of these issues. Yep. And they're beginning to put pressure on firms. And so they're saying, I don't need you to perform this month. I need you to create a sustainable business for me over the next 5 or 10 or 15 years. And so go do it. Now, I understand that takes time, and business schools have sort of taught people to behave very differently, that I ran for a while, for example, but we have to get to it. And I think those two forces, being able to do it quickly and shareholder, give me optimism.
Well, Blair, that's been very thought-provoking. Thank you for your insights, your thoughts, and I do hope there is, as you described those two hopes, we can take it forward as an industry and respond appropriately. Thank you very much for your time.
So I'm hoping this group catches the ideas, and the next book is Finding Dawn.